I started working as a garbage man because of the lucrative pay. I wanted to be able to provide for myself and a future mate. It helped that I didn't find it hard to wake up at 3 in the morning. I got my own 2-bedroom apartment. By the age of 21, I started going out on the town in an attempt to meet a woman. I found one that stood out to me. I saw her sitting all by herself in a bubble tea shop, reading a colorful paperback. I introduced myself and she let me sit down with her. She was soft-spoken and seemed generally sad. She would perk up about certain things in conversation. But overall she seemed to have a past that made her cautious and hesitant to make friends. We met several more times and I found out she didn't even speak with her family anymore, not her parents, brother or any of her old friends, without anyone. She just survived on her own painting in her little studio apartment. She sold her art as part of her income, but she also worked part-time at an art cafe where she hosted and taught wine and paint nights. She was sweet but didn't want to say anything more about her past, like why nobody talked to her anymore. After dating for 1.5 years, she moved in with me. I felt responsible for her and cared deeply. I wanted her to know she could come to me for anything. About 3 months of living together were really wonderful. Then her childhood friend got in touch with her again. I thought it was great and I supported her. She was really excited but nervous to talk to him again. I thought it was because she was afraid of getting close only to be hurt again. But that's not exactly what was going on. It turned out he didn't speak to anyone from his past either. He was working a construction job 4 hours away from us and started video calling and texting my girlfriend all the time. I tried to remain supportive, but he was taking up a lot of her time and it seemed way more than necessary, even if they hadn't spoken for a while. When I started thinking this way, I felt like I sounded paranoid for accusing them of falling for each other. I decided my girlfriend just wouldn't do that. Especially not when I was there for her and being exactly who she needed in life right after I decided to relax about it. She asked me if her friend could come stay in the spare room for 4 days, the duration of a local construction project. I didn't want to open the door to distrust in the relationship. So I said he could. I wanted her to see me as the man she could spend her life with. And if I didn't let her friends come over, she wouldn't feel like this was her home. I feel stupid now for being so considerate about how she felt and her future because she didn't consider me or our future at all. I said yes, but I also called off work so I wouldn't have to leave them alone. I slept lightly for the first 2 nights, but it seemed like my girlfriend stayed in bed all night. She woke up with me at the same time the first 2 mornings, but on the third, she was gone. When I woke up, I ran through the house in a panic only to find her in the kitchen with AP making breakfast for us all. I sat alone uncomfortably watching them from the table. AP gobbled down the eggs while standing up and left for the site. I breathed a sigh of relief. Having my girlfriend and myself again. But she only sat with me quietly to eat her eggs. Then retreated to the shower after her shower. She left to bring APA lunch. She packed for him. This pissed me off. I bit my tongue until she was out the door. But then I freaked out. She never packed me lunch. Even though I mentioned how hungry I was whenever I got home, when she got back, I told her we needed to talk. I said I didn't appreciate how affectionate she was being with someone that was only meant to be a friend, that her actions seemed like that of a girlfriend and they talked way too much. She absolutely freaked out. I couldn't have seen it coming. She was always so meek and mild-mannered, but it changed in an instant as soon as I accused her of being romantic with a P. Now I knew it was because I guessed exactly what was happening and she didn't like that. I could see through her acting. She accused me of being crazy and paranoid for thinking she'd be so disrespectful to me. She said I was wrong and needed to have more trust in her. After being together for nearly 2 years, I started to second-guess how I was feeling and left the house. I didn't know what to think anymore. But I knew I didn't like how she talked to her friend. I decided to search for her mom on Facebook. I found her and sent her a message. I explained the situation and said, long story short, I needed to know if something happened between these friends in the past. She called me and told me that she and my wife's father stopped talking to their daughter completely when she and her friend refused to stop sleeping with each other. It was years ago now, but they were very inconsiderate of anyone else and would cheat on other people instead of just being together. I was speechless and mortified. I drove back home in a hurry and found them locked in the spare room. I banged on the door and yelled for them both to get out. I said I got off the phone with her mom and knew all about their off and on hidden relationship. My girlfriend then said she doesn't need to explain herself to me. Then started packing her stuff as they loaded his old truck. I called her a bunch of names for wasting my time and making me think she loved me. She was crying, but I don't know why she was only getting what she wanted. Right. 1 month later, I got home from work and found her sitting on my doorstep. She was crying really hard. Her face was red. I'm not an evil person, but I was glad to see she wasn't happy. She said AP met a new single woman with a nice home and decided that sleeping with each other no matter who they were with was wrong. In order to get back to my house, she had to take a Uber. I told her to go get her old apartment back because I never wanted to see her and I would certainly never trust her. I slammed the door in her face. I have no idea where she went or what she did with her life. Whenever I passed the bubble tea shop, I never saw her. She ruined the good thing we had because she couldn't leave her repeating mistake in the past. I am so sorry. Your girlfriend had this terrible taboo relationship with her friend. If she learned anything from her past, it should have been to leave him alone so she could move on. She had a chance at a happy life with you and convinced you to trust her. She might have believed the mistake was in the past, but she didn't realize it was still up to her to let him back in her life. I am glad you came out of this situation. Having learned a lesson, you weren't persuaded to forgive her and you follow through with your hunches. Contacting her mom was the perfect way to know that without a doubt. This girl was no good. You just happened to come home and find them locked in the room, but you already knew something was up since they talked way too much. I wish you the best of luck in life and thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I were married for 13 years and during that time I supported her as she started attending school to become a veterinarian. Before she graduated, she started working for an experienced vet with his own practice. We were very much in love and she thanked me often for supporting her during this time. So she'd be able to follow her dream of becoming a vet and owning her own practice, meaning that hopefully she could take over the one she was working at. Now, when the man she works for retires, he mentioned that he was looking for someone to fill his role. And my wife believed he was referring to her. He was, but I don't think she anticipated what he was going to ask of her in return. I certainly didn't anticipate her betrayal. She came home late one day feeling quite happy and energetic. I expected her to be exhausted because that's how she usually felt. After an extra long day, her coming home late usually meant she had to deal with unexpected animals being brought in. Sometimes she witnessed death and on those days, she usually went to bed without eating. I felt bad, but she did choose the career. So it was something she had to cope with anyway. On this night, she was not sad or exhausted, quite the opposite. I asked what happened today and the smile fell from her face immediately. She looked shocked that I was asking such a normal question. She said nothing unusual and asked why I asked. I laughed nervously and said, I usually asked her that when she got home, but she was also very happy a second ago. So that's why I was asking. Her face softened, but she didn't know what to say. She finally came up with a fake reason for her bouncy attitude, saying it was the receptionist's birthday. So they played music, ate cake and acted silly. It was refreshing after a long day. This totally made sense to me and take me for a fool. I believed her. Everything returned to normal for a few days except she was happier than normal. Who knew the receptionist's birthday would have such a lasting effect on her? She came home on Friday night late and said life always has a way of working out for the better. She's so thankful to be pursuing her dream and working in this career. I was hesitant to say I loved doing it for her because I just felt like something was wrong. I decided to bring her flowers and a restaurant lunch to work the next day. And that's the day everything changed. The receptionist's name is Blair. When I walked in holding flowers and food, she said she hoped I was the Prince Charming she'd been waiting for. She was flirty and pretty. But I told her I was a married man looking for my wife. When I said her name, she looked me in the eye with a very upset expression. She didn't know what to say or do. She just stared at me. I asked if she was okay and if she could go get her for me. She finally stood up, looked into the hallway and whispered for me to come with her outside. I was extremely confused, but I went along with it. We stood by her car and she told me something. I just couldn't believe she said the other night. She was slower to leave than usual and already said goodbye to Mr. Vet and my wife. They were the last two in the building besides her as she put on her coat. She was looking at the security cameras and saw them doing things in a back room with the door shut. Probably not realizing that she was still in the building. My vision started spinning when she told me this, but I snapped myself out of it because my wife was good. She was always so kind and honest and grateful. That's what I was thinking. I asked Blair when her birthday was and she said October 20th, it was July. So I knew my wife lied about that, but I still couldn't believe she was cheating on me. I told Blair that I needed her help in exchange for the roses and lunch. I just needed her to stay a little late again each night until she caught them again so she could record the screen with her phone and send it to me. I wrote my number on the little card that came with the roses. Maybe I was flirting a little, but that's for fate to decide. She agreed while she worked. She was uncomfortable knowing now that my wife was married and doing what she was doing when she first caught them. She assumed the woman was single and wrote it off as none of her concern. She had to fake being nice to avoid suspicion. She didn't have to wait long for them to do it again. She recorded it and sent it to me. It was hard for me to watch. It was my wife's face and they were doing it. That's all I needed to see. I posted it on the internet naming her the Vet and the business name, effectively informing everyone in the town and anyone they knew my wife was the quickest to react. But she got home and greeted me before knowing what I'd done. I asked her if she looked at her phone lately and that's all it took. She hadn't checked it since she cheated on me just hours before. She gasped, covered her mouth and I could tell her heart started pounding. She was shaking and her breathing was uneven. She threw her phone at me in her frustration. She dropped to the floor. And the first thing she said was that AP was going to lose his business. I said, well, that's too bad. And my wife charged at me like she became a monster. She blamed me for it. But I said she was crazy. I told her to get out and she was so hurt by me for some reason that she only grabbed a few things and left. She tried telling her family any number of stories in ways that portrayed her as the victim. They didn't believe anything. She said they saw the video and lost all faith in her. They told her she basically risked her career and marriage for nothing. She didn't have to do it, but she did. And this is what happens to people when they don't act with respect. I know all this because it was in the comments of my post. AP lost a bunch of his patients' owners. No one trusted him to behave responsibly and husbands didn't want their wives or daughters bringing their pets there. His business took a huge hit without being able to pay employees. He closed his business. My wife begged me to forgive her after she accepted that her whole family hated her for sleeping with AP. When we first got married, her family was super proud of her for catching me. I refused to allow her to come back into my life because after all those years of supporting her and committing myself to her, she betrayed me for someone else. I would have been a fool to help her. She ended up moving back in with her family. She wasn't working at the time because of AP closing his practice. So she had to quickly find a job. She was absolutely miserable because AP wanted nothing to do with her. He considered her bad luck and felt sick to his stomach. Whenever he looked at her, he let himself mix pleasure with business and it destroyed both. She actually told him she was married, but he swore I'd never find out once he retired. He promised she could have the business and he'd leave her alone. But I doubt that was going to happen. My wife told me all this in the hopes it would encourage me to forgive her. It didn't help, but it was nice to know the reasoning behind it. I haven't heard from her in a long time now and have been thinking about asking out Blair. She got a new job pretty fast and has remained on my side and loyal since all of this started. She gives me hope, and overall, I've learned that it's possible to let go of someone you once loved and trusted because unfair and unpredictable things happen in life. There are other trustworthy people out there. You've been through a shocking life event. I am so sorry. Your wife made a choice that rendered the 13+ years you spent with her a waste of time. At least you learned some things, but it's extremely disappointing that she didn't honor her vows and respect you any more than that. I appreciate your attitude about it now, although it must have been very difficult to remain so resilient. I'm glad you had Blair on your side for the entirety of the event and afterward. You were both very clever to get the evidence needed to support the claims against the business. And after AP's irresponsibility and disrespect towards another man for sleeping with his wife, he didn't deserve to remain in business. Everything that needed to happen did. I'm so glad you didn't try to forgive her or keep her in your life. It takes strength to resist caring about someone after spending so many years with them. But it was her own choice that led her to this point, and there's no reason you should have to sacrifice or become less of a man. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.